All right, I got 9:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. All righty. So, today we are talking about a very vital topic when it comes to the church and continued growth of the church. And that topic today is youthful apostasy. Now, if you don't know what apostasy is, because it's not a term we would often use, that simply means the abandonment or renunciation of a religious belief. So what we're talking about is basically, why do young people leave the church? Right? Why when people go off to college is the drop rate so high, after somebody has grown up in the church along the way. So that's really what we're trying to deal with here. And I have a lot of my own ideas on the reason this ends up happening. I did try to find as much research as I could on reasons that are stated that it happens. I don't know that those are often all that reliable. I think a lot of times people give reasons so that it sounds better afterwards, as opposed to their real personal reasons for it. But based on what I can find, doing a little bit of research on why, there's a few that keep coming up, and we really have to find a way to address it, right? This is not a new thing, right? If you go to any church building anywhere, if I go to visit my grandmother in Coldwater and go to church up there, it's a very elderly congregation. There's no youth. That tends to be the way of it. You have a church that's been in a place for a long time, and it just kind of ages out because we're not bringing in new people, and the kids that are growing up in it are often falling away and not necessarily bringing in any of their peers. So it's a huge issue. It's something we have to figure out a way to combat. Only way to do that is to learn why it happens so that we can try to address it. So if we're talking about that, let's just run through some of these reasons that I found based on polls that have been done. They reach out to people, they ask them why they're no longer a member of the church, things like that. So, and by the way, when I say member of the church in this instance, I'm just talking about Christian in the broader terms, right? Not necessarily limited to Church of Christ. I couldn't find any real good answers that were different there. Okay, so the first one I had is a disconnection between faith and real life. Many young adults feel the church is not addressing real life issues, and I think it's probably a realistic answer, right? For why somebody might be a little disillusioned with the church. But I don't think that's unique to the youth. I think a lot of times, a lot of congregations can just be very kind of in their own little bubble, right? And we come to church and we do the things we're supposed to do at church, and we put money in the plate and things like that, but we don't directly involve ourselves in the things that are going on around us. We don't go out into the community and help those that are needy, even though we read from a Bible that tells us we should go out and help those that are needy. And I think a lot of times people see that when they're growing up, and then they get out in the real world and they don't see that sort of action when they look back at their church that they grew up in, and it kind of disillusions them a little bit with the things we're preaching and not necessarily doing. So I think that's a reasonable thing to be upset about, although I would argue that if you feel that way as a member of the congregation, that the congregation's not doing enough, what are you doing to improve that situation? And that should be a question we ask ourselves all the time. What am I doing to actually make a difference in the communities that I'm in? What am I doing to be that light into the world that we profess to be? All right, and then we have perceived hypocrisy. This is one of the top of the list. If you look up why people leave the church, they'll throw this one out. I think this is a bit of a, I don't know. I think it's a lazy argument in a lot of regards. This is Chris's personal opinion. I think it's a bit lazy just to leave something like the church, and when somebody asks you why, you're like, oh, it's just a bunch of hypocrites. I'm not saying that there aren't hypocrites. There are, right? And there's good and bad in almost any community or any situation. So that one's a bit bothersome to me, but it is constantly on there. The idea here is that people see the inconsistency between what's being preached and what's actually being practiced by the members. And that's a big one. There's actually, I've mentioned this all the time. There's an old Christian rockish, rapish band called DC Talk from back in the day. I was in like junior high, and they had a song called Jesus Freak. And at the beginning of it, there's somebody just talking, and he says one of the biggest problems, like the reason for all these people not being around, is all these people that confess Christ with their mouth, but they go and they live completely alternative to that, right? So you're saying, hey, we should do these things, we should act this way. Gary's teaching us all the time, on how we're supposed to do it, and then we agree with those things verbally, but we don't actually act them out, right? And imagine, I'm trying to, because I don't have these answers. My daughter's 7. I don't know what she's going to be going through at any point. I don't have any real answer to any of this stuff, but I try to imagine, we raise her up, we bring her to church. When the doors are open, we're here. We try to get her involved in all these things, and we try to kind of control it and shape what she knows and sees. And then at some point when she is more autonomous, how do we make sure that she doesn't look back at it and think, hey, my parents always told me this, but I never saw them act this way. I never saw them reach out. I never stop and help some woman on the side of the road, whatever it happens to be. And those are things that we have to make sure that we have to be really careful about that as Christians, because there are people that are looking at us, right? All of the church should be. We should be learning from one another, and especially the youth. They're looking at the people that are older than them and more involved in them. Number 3 was just a general desire for autonomy. Kids rebel, right? It's just a thing. When I was 15, 16, I did everything my parents did not want me to do. I mean, nothing absolutely terrible, but if they said you got to be home by 10, I was home at 10:30 just to push it and see what I could do. It wasn't until they've grounded me from seeing Hillary for about a month that I said, you know what, I might start acting right again. But kids just rebel in general. So once they're out of the house, it's fairly common that people feel the need to kind of reject or question the things that they have had put on them by their parents and by church leadership, school leadership, whatever it happens to be. So how do you combat that one? Well, I'll get to it in a second, but for now I'll just mention the best way to do that is you've got to make their faith theirs, right? If their faith is yours, if my daughter's faith is her faith simply because I make her do it, and that's as far as it goes for her, then once she's out from under my control, out from under my wing, where's that faith, right? There's nothing that's going to protect her from falling away. Huge issue right now is the next one, which is the influence of secular culture. All right, I know these sorts of issues have always been around, but you have to imagine that if you grew up in the 50s, it was a little easier to protect your kids from certain things. I can go online and find anything right now, like anything. Whatever immoral thing you can think of, you can go online, you can find it, and it's easy, and kids find it. I have a friend of mine who deals with pornography addiction, and he said the first time he ever started watching it, he was 10. And it's crazy. You can't get away from that stuff. So they're constantly influenced by all these secular worldviews, and that is going to, it's going to work on them over time, right? Just like anything else. And so we have to be really careful to control that, but you can't control it too much. That's also a problem, because if your kids have never seen anything outside of the church, then when they do get that freedom, they can go a little, it can be a little crazy for them and hard to deal with. So we'll talk about that in a second. I kind of got ahead of myself. The next one was a lack of deep personal faith. I mentioned that when I talked about that desire for autonomy. But a lot of people that have mentioned why they fell away is they didn't feel like the religion was theirs. They didn't feel like they had an actual good Christian relationship with God directly, that I was just a member of the church because I'm supposed to be, which isn't good enough. And then currently, kind of a newer one is this just general disagreement with church teachings. I think that kind of happens due to the secular culture that we see. If you go on Twitter, if you go on social media, you're going to see a lot of people that don't agree with the church. You're going to kind of get hit over the head with it. You're going to see very good. Let's give an example. homosexuality and the acceptance of homosexual marriage. That side did a masterful job with the way that they worded things when they were pushing for more acceptance, right? Love is love, right? That's the way. How do you say no to love, right? That sounds like a nice message until you realize what they're actually talking about. But that wording, right? That idea, it works on people, especially younger people. Younger people tend to be a little more emotionally manipulative, manipulatable, I guess. And so when they hear something like that, and then the church says, no, hard line here, you can't go past that. We do not allow homosexual marriage, and homosexuality is in and of itself a sin. Well, now you got a clash between that person trying to be loving of the world and the people around them, this person that they go to school with that happens to be a practicing homosexual, and then that now we've got a bit of an issue, right? So we have to teach. We have to teach truth. I'm not in any way saying, hey, don't teach the truth here, which is something that a lot of churches in the bigger sense, are doing. A lot of churches are watering down the message so that they can appeal to these people a little bit more. Well, then one of the other reasons that I had run across was not enough actual Bible is taught at some of these churches where this is happening. So you can't water down the truth, right? You have to stand firm, but there is a possibly better way that we can address it directly when we're talking to people. In general, why does this matter? Well, the Bible warns us about this kind of stuff. The Bible warns us about falling away, about apostasy. 2 Timothy 4, 3-4. For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions, and will turn away from listening to the truth and wander off into myths. And I think that's what we're seeing. You're seeing a lot of people that are I'm on social media a lot, not necessarily active. I read a lot on social media, and like Twitter or X, whatever it is now. I keep seeing all these videos of, homosexual female pastors or preachers at these churches and things like that. There's only one way you get to that, and that is by wanting to hear what you want to hear out of the Bible and not listen to the truth of the Bible. If you listen to the Bible, if you read it directly, you'd know that those things fly in the face of what the truth is, but it doesn't matter when people want what they want. And then just a general warning that I saw in Matthew 24, verse 12, and because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. I might be bending that one a little bit, but I thought it fit because, it talks about the, lawlessness increasing. Well, look at what's going on in the world. Look at the things that are accepted morally now that weren't accepted 20 years ago or 50 years ago. And as those things increase, I think you're going to continue to have more and more people fall away. And then I want to read Hebrews chapter 3 real quick. Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12. Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. So this seems like a general warning against the unbelief. Like if you have this issue, right, of unbelief, if you're doubting or whatever, we need to be very careful about it. And I'm going to jump back into that verse in a second as we're going to go into verse 13. But let's keep looking real quick at what we can do about it, right? Biblical instructions for teaching and raising kids. What do we see in the Bible about how we're supposed to do this? The verse that always pops into my head when I'm thinking about raising your children is Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. All right, it is on us as parents primarily to be there for our kids to help them. I've seen a lot of issues, maybe not issues. I've seen a lot of complaints in general from people that, the church didn't do this, the youth group didn't have this available for, whoever. Yes, those are things we need to do as a congregation. We need to make sure that our youth group is strong. We need to make sure that we involve our kids in things. But the number one throughout the life of the kid is the parent. And it's up to us to make sure that we do everything. We can't rely on on the church itself, by itself, to raise our kids for us when it comes to religious things, moral things. I'm seeing this in actual school, not Bible school. I cannot send Darby to school and let her teacher just teach her and expect her to make A's. I have to work with her at home. We have to do homework with her and things like that and help along the way. That is, to me, the way the relationship should be with the church. A parent needs to be involved with the child and what they're doing. And I'm talking all the way up through graduation as a senior into adulthood. Be involved in those things. Don't just send your kid up here and be like, well, they're good enough. Somebody else is teaching them. That's an important part. But on that note, I think a lot of other people would have mentioned this verse, which is in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 through 9. And this is God basically telling the Israelite people what he wants, right? And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children and shall talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. If you don't understand, that's every time, right? That's all at all available times. When you rise, when you lie down, when you're just out walking, bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. The truth, right? The Bible, your child's faith. These are things that you have to make an important part of your life each and every day, and your kids are going to see it if you're not actively doing that. If I'm saying this and then I'm not talking about the Bible at home to Darby, well, I'm guilty of the hypocrisy that I mentioned earlier. We have to be careful. We have to make sure that we are directly involved and that we really focus on the truth and why it matters. And we can't be lazy parents when it comes to raising our children spiritually. I'm going to jump back to that Hebrews chapter 3 real quick. I read verse 12, right? Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. And then if we keep going into verse 13, but exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. To me, this is a direct call for the congregation, for the other members of a church, for all Christian brothers and sisters, right, to build up each other. We have to be involved. There has to be a feeling of family, I think, here, right? I've mentioned before, I wish we would get back to, and it's weird, right? It seems weird because it seems like an old thing, but I wish we would get back to calling each other brother and sister so-and-so. I think it builds up that idea of community and family, and people want to be a part of that. And I think that helps your children a lot. I mean, if your kids are coming in, so you come to church, you sit in the back, they listen to a lesson that they find boring for an hour, and then you leave, and that's the end of it. That doesn't make for a long-term commitment to Christ. They need to be involved. We need to help them get involved. We need to reach out to people that aren't involved so that we can build each other up. The whole idea here is that we're all exhorting one another. It's a team. We're all working together here. Talking about that church leadership and mentorship. If you look at Ephesians chapter 4, I'm kind of verse heavy in this section. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 13. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. This is a constant growth, right? We're growing together into maturity as spiritual people, as Christians. The kids can't just be in the audience, right? They can't just be watching other people do this. They have to be directly involved in it. We have to get them involved in it and work on this together. Titus actually mentions young people directly. Titus chapter 2, verses 6 through 7. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity and dignity. So, mentions younger men there. Self-control in general, that's the thing that we should be teaching. And then it goes on to talk about them actually, and it says here, and in your teaching show integrity and dignity. It expects these younger men to be active and to be teaching other people. Okay, so if you're talking about an active young person in the Bible teaching other people, who's the person that comes to mind? Anybody? Oh, this class loves to talk. I do not like teaching in here for that reason. No offense. Timothy, thank you. I know, it's weird. I sit in here and I do the same thing. I talk in every class I'm in because I find it interesting. I do not open my mouth in the auditorium. It's something weird. It's too big. I wish we were in a smaller class. Timothy, yes, Timothy is a perfect example of that. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 12. Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Timothy was able to do great things because Paul was a great mentor for him, right? Paul, and not just Paul, right? His mother and grandmother that helped him to become a Christian, to grow in his faith. And that is, honestly, if I looked back at, let's see, 2 Timothy, I think mentions that, yeah. So if you look at 2 Timothy 1 and 5, I kind of glossed over this, I skipped over this part, I guess. So if you're talking about the responsibility of the parents, Paul in 2 Timothy says, I'm reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. So grandmother and mother passed on this faith to Timothy, and then Paul kind of takes over as a bit of a mentor to help grow Timothy into a preacher that can go out. That's what should be happening here. We should, as parents, be getting our kids started and really working on them, staying with them to grow in Christianity, and then the church should be able to help and assist in that in further growth. But that growth is going to require involvement. And that's probably the hardest one, I guess. How do you involve the younger people in a way that interests them, right? That they're interested in, that helps them grow, that doesn't take away from, hey, we'd probably be served better by having an older person handle this particular thing because they're better at it. There are discussions to be had there about the best way to move forward with that. And I've got some ideas, and we'll talk about that in a second. What time is it? 53. Okay. And then the last verse for this particular section is Ecclesiastes 12:1. I was mainly just looking for anything that dealt with the youth here, but it says, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. I'm 41. I don't necessarily feel old, but I'm a lot more tired than I used to be, right? Life is harder at 41 than it used to be, and I imagine it's going to get worse. But, I have a 7-year-old daughter. I pick her up too often, throw her on my neck or whatever. I did that a while back. Felt something pop in my back. Couldn't pick her up for for a month. The whole point of this verse, I think, it's talking about remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before all these bad things, right? Before life has been able to wear on you, and like there at the end, he says, before you get to the point where you say, I have no pleasure in them. Young people have energy, right? They have ideas, they have energy. They want, I think, to be active in these things. And so let's use it, right? It's a tool for us to do. Let's get them involved, and let's make use of that fact that they're still young and bright-eyed and have the energy to push forward with this stuff. All right. So, practical steps to address it. There's no easy fix, right? These are ideas, and I would hope that after this we could, as a congregation, have discussions on how to maybe address some of these things a little better. So, number one, develop a relational church culture. So, look at in my verse for this is Hebrews chapter 10, starting in verse 24. Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. How to stir up one another to love and good works. That is not an individual being a Christian by themselves. And I think that is that's an issue I have, right? I mentioned, I think last time, I tend to come in, sit with my family, I stay with my family, and then I go home, right? I mean, I'm involved in things, I teach classes or whatever, and all that, but I don't know that I look for fulfillment and edification from other people at the church, right? I consider myself pretty self-sufficient, right? And so I'm just like, well, I don't need that. But I'm also not providing it for other people when I act that way. And I mean, this is the third verse I've read that mentions this type of idea, that we should be making a considerable effort to work together and to be a united community as a congregation here. And part of the reason for that is if a kid thinks that that church is him coming on a Sunday and listening to a preacher that he finds boring for an hour and then going home, that's not faith. That's not going to stick with him. And as soon as he is able to make that decision while he's off of college, he's going to make the decision not to do it. But if to him the church is a family and people that he can rely on and people that he enjoys being with, that's a lot harder to step away from. And I think he's going to look for that when he goes off to college if he moves away in that area too. So that's something we all need to make a bigger, bigger part of what we do at the church is make it into a community where we care and we love each other, and I think we do, but sometimes we don't necessarily focus on that as much as we should. I don't, right? So I'm assuming other people. I just assume if I'm doing this that probably other people are too. All right, number 2. Equip youth with a biblical worldview. All right, Colossians 2:8 is my verse for this one. All right, see to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit. All right, that seems fitting for what we're talking about here. According to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. Don't let people sway you by these philosophical debates and whatever else it happens to be. Those are the things that I see often, right? I see questions meant to sow doubt in believers, right? If God's so good, why do these evil things happen, right? Those kind of questions. I'm going to warn you now, if you have young children, I guess it doesn't really matter their age, but you do not want your child's first time to hear reasoned good arguments, and there are good arguments that can be made from people that don't believe. You do not want their first time to hear these things to be when they're off at college and they've never had to deal with it before. Because what's going to happen to that faith? Well, they're going to go into a class and they're going to hear something that hammers away at it a little bit at a time, and they're there for 4 years. And what's going to happen before the end of that 4-year period? Well, now that faith's all chipped away. And we can't let that happen. We have got to learn these topics. We have to learn these things. I think it's important for us to be able to argue against this. I mentioned last time, Apologetics Press is a very good resource for this. If you go to Apologetics Press website, you can find all sorts of information that they use to combat these sorts of discussions. So I think we should probably have more apologetics classes in general in the church and involve our youth in those so that they can answer those tough questions. When those tough questions are asked to them when they're out on their own, they're able to answer them and stay firm in their faith.
I would take a step further and say that needs to be a more broadly applied focus of the church at large.
Yeah.
I mean, every now and then, because if you're creating more classes, then the people who come to classes will be well equipped to go to college.
Yeah, sure.
But the vast majority of your congregation only appears on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So, like, when's the last time you heard a Christian defense against homosexuality from the pulpit on Sunday morning? Like, completely devoted to that one topic.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Granted that the parents know the correct arguments in order to pass on to their kids.
Right.
Obviously, they have a responsibility in themselves, but if we really want to get to the vast majority of our children, we have to get to the vast majority of our parents. And the vast majority of our parents are only here on Sunday morning. That's its own problem.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And if anybody didn't hear that, that was the point there was, hey, let's go beyond just some classes, because you're kind of preaching to the choir when you're talking about a Sunday morning class or a Wednesday night class, because it's the same people that are coming to those, and those are the ones you're not as worried about falling away. So maybe doing something on a Sunday morning when it's more active at the congregation. You have more of those people there that just come for that Sunday morning. That's a good thing. Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you. Number 3, create space for questions and doubts. A lot of people mentioned that they did not feel like when they were struggling with their faith, they couldn't mention it to anybody without seeming like they weren't good enough, like a lesser Christian. And so they just kept it to themselves, tried to deal with it themselves. Well, we see how that works out. We have to make sure that we make people feel comfortable with their struggles, right? It shouldn't be hard for us. It is. It should not be hard for us to walk down front and say that we're struggling with X or Y. But it's a tough thing for a lot of people. How much more so if you were actually struggling with your faith and didn't feel like you could mention that to somebody without somebody just kind of beating you over the head with it. So I don't really have a good answer here for the general feel of how to change that feel in the congregation. I did see some people had seen some benefit in general Q&A sessions at the church. Don't know how you would handle that, but you would do that with, I think, anonymous questions. Let people write their questions first. I know Gary and Derek have done something similar on Sunday nights, where they take kind of tougher questions and then they talk them out from a biblical view, and I think that's good. I would honestly like to see debates and things like that happen in at some forum. I don't exactly know how you get people to it, but anyway.
Your point about increasing relationships between brethren, we put a lot of focus on the call to invitation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of also making it plainly clear. You can come talk to an elder in private.
Yeah.
You can come talk to a minister in private if it's something that you're struggling with, or if you're close enough to one of your brothers or sisters. You mentioned the porn addiction. Secret.
Yeah.
Among men in the church and without. It's something that can't talk.
Yeah. Well, on that note, my friend that does have the porn addiction, his church, and he's a Baptist, they actually have a men's group that he goes to, and this is not its primary concern, but like 90% of the dudes in it, it's all younger guys in their 20s, are dealing with that. Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Number 4, encourage active participation and ownership of faith. Timothy's our example here, right? He was active. He wasn't just a member, right? He went and did. He tried to go out and preach. Great verse for this, James 1:22. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Now, that starts with the parent, because if the kid doesn't see it from the parent, they're probably not going to do it. But we have to get the kids involved in being active users. Active participants in worship, as in the church as a whole. I think Lads to Leaders is a good example of a way to do that, right? You get your young guys leading singing and giving lessons, and even the things that you do outside of like up front, some of those things. The centurion of Scripture, kids learning, repeating Scripture to Brother Gary. I think those things are good. It keeps the kids active, and it makes them feel like they're doing something here. They're a part of it, as opposed to, like I said, just an audience member, which is what we don't need that, right? We want you to be here in the congregation while we're worshiping together, but it's got to go a little bit beyond that. So there probably needs to be a more concerted effort, I think, and I haven't talked to the elders about this. I don't know what plans we have in place in general, but probably need a more concerted effort to figure out a way to assign young people. I'm talking, starting to hit that 15, 16, 17-ish age range, and assign them some level of leadership. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
It's just like eating. Everybody here is going to eat. They probably think about what they're going to eat now. So, until you desire the Word of God, it don't matter what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to desire it, and I think that goes back to like even as parents, right? It's not just, it is on the kid, right? The kid as a teenager needs to desire it as well. But they're less likely to desire it if we, as their parent, don't also desire it, right? If we don't desire that that constant relationship, that truth, and growing in knowledge in the Bible. And if we do those things, we can help pull them along with us. So what we'd have to do there is find some way to get them more involved in things like service projects and stuff like that. It's tough, right? Kids are busy, right? Teenagers got a lot of things going on. They're playing football and they're in whatever after school programs and things like that, and then they would just want to spend time with their friends. That is why, but that one I mentioned there about wanting to spend time with their friends, I think it is vitally important that we make sure that youth programs we have are fun for kids. It's okay to have fun, right? It's okay to sometimes just go out and fellowship with brothers and sisters in Christ and not necessarily have, a 10-minute devotional thought followed by a bunch of singing. I'm not saying those are good things. Those are great things, right? We should do those things. But we should also want to be with these people. And if people are looking at an option, I can go and help the youth at the church, or I can go hang out with my friends, and my friends are significantly more fun because of the way that it's set up, we're going to lose kids that way, right? I'm not saying that we should just have fun things, right? That's what I mentioned earlier. A lot of congregations are trying to do that to fix this, right? And then you end up with a rock show as worship service, with smoke and lights and guitars to try to be more fun for the youth. I don't think that creates spiritual growth, right? That there's a happy medium there. I think that we should be striving for. But I'm just trying to remember when I was in the youth group. Everybody wanted to be a part of the youth group, right? I couldn't wait when I was in 6th grade to hit 7th grade so I could really be more active in it. I brought my best friend from school, and he became a Christian. And there were so many of the kids that brought friends from school because it was fun to hang out with all these people and the things that we did. And they were fun things. They were Christian things. And there, like I said, there has to be a happy medium, but we have to be able to give people a reason to want to be part of it. And I think if we do that, then it's easier to tell a kid, hey, Bob, do you want to take a group of these kids? You can kind of lead them. You're 17. You're old enough, I think, that you can kind of put this together. Take a group of kids and go, do some work at, this widow's house or whatever, and let them do it on their own. Let them take ownership in it, as opposed to the same people doing it all the time, right? The same older people that have been doing it forever, and those are great things. We want them to be doing those, but let's try to not just say, you come and do what I tell you to do. Let's let them take some ownership in it and make those decisions for themselves, and probably fail a few times. But I think that's good. I think that would help them be a little more active participant as opposed to simply along for the ride when it comes to Christian things. And then number 5 here. Foster authenticity and integrity. I mentioned before, hypocrisy is one of the main reasons that's given for people falling away. So we as a church have to do everything we can to be transparent. Philippians 2:14-16 is the verse I have here. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain. We have to be a light unto the world, right? We're called to do so. We are a beacon of truth and godliness and good to the world around us. And if we're not acting that way when I go to work, right? If I act that way here, but then I go to work and I've got a foul mouth and I hate everybody and I'm grumbling and miserable all the time, that's that hypocrisy coming right back. And we have to be very careful there, because that will drive people away quicker than just about anything. And I think that's just a general. That's not necessarily a youth thing, but it helps the youth when they see that, hey, our leaders at church, right, the spiritual leaders, they admit when they mess up, right? They tell us, hey, we tried this thing and it didn't work, or whatever it happens to be. I think those are good things, and it at least removes the argument from being able to be made that hypocrisy is the reason that I'm looking elsewhere. All right. Anybody get any questions on those 5?
I think all of they're all interrelated.
Yeah.
Like if you do enjoyable things together, if you seek opportunities, we had a men's a week or 2 ago. If you seek opportunities to spend time with these people that you are supposed to treat as family, be family with, then you will develop stronger relationships. If you develop stronger relationships, you will start taking worship more seriously. If you start taking worship more seriously, you will act it out in your daily life, and therefore
Right. Yeah, all this is interconnected, and this is, honestly, I go back to my usual, any class I end up teaching somehow I come back to Christian love, and that is if you love your Christian brothers and sisters, if you love the people in the world and you want to save their souls, then that is going to guide you in the way that you act, right? If I'm really concerned about, the youth as they're leaving, I'm going to reach out to them. I'm going to try to involve them in things so that, I'm going to try to help them get set up at a congregation when they move off to college or whatever it happens to be, and we're going to do all these things together.
when you were in the youth group, you invited your friend because your youth group was something you took seriously.
Yeah.
It was a big part of your life. Like when I was in high school, my big thing was video games and driving around town up to no good. Like that's what I took seriously.
Yeah.
I invited my friends to do it. It's your focus.
Yeah, right. And whatever is your focus are the things that you're going to focus on, and the things you're going to reach out to other people about. And let's help them, right? Let's help the youth make that be their focus. Was that the first or second bell? First. Okay. All right, and then I had separately from this. That was the majority of what I had, but I kept looking up these reasons that are given because I find it interesting. And one of the reasons that I saw was that churches seem overprotective. I thought that was a weird way of wording it, but they mentioned all these amount of Christians that had fallen away that felt this way. What I copied here offline said a few of the defining characteristics of today's teens and young adults is their unprecedented access to ideas and worldviews, as well as their prodigious consumption of popular culture. We talked about that, right? It's right at their fingertips. As Christians, they express the desire for their faith in Christ to connect to the world they live in. So they see the world out here. Yes, world and church should be separate, right? But they see the world out here, and they want the church to be involved in it. And so what they're seeing, and when they're saying that the church seems overprotective, they're saying the church is so afraid to do anything out in the world that they're in this little insulated bubble. And because of that, they're like, hey, we want you to, let's go out into these communities and get involved in some of these things. If your church is, if the only thing your church is ever doing about the world or in the world is complaining from the pulpit that, modern media is bad, I don't know that that's going to be enough, to address that, right? So they're talking about real world problems that they see, right? Whether it be poverty, homelessness, whatever. Let's get the church involved in those things, so that we're just not seen as kind of so. I hate to say so separate. We are supposed to be separate from the world. It's a funky way to explain this, and I'm probably doing a terrible job of it. But we need to be involved in the world enough to reach out and be that light, right? As opposed to let's just shut our doors and build a wall between us and the world so that we're never looking at it, and then we don't mention it. So that one I did find as kind of interesting. One of the big ones that came across is churches come across as antagonistic to science. Okay, so this is your general. Oh well, I'm in high school, I'm in college, and now I'm seeing people talk about evolution or this or that, or the fact that stars seem to be getting further apart from each other, which means they originated from some central point, right? That's these ideas that you're going to hear. This is not an issue for me. I mean, it is an issue for plenty of people. I've seen it. To me, the church and science go hand in hand, right? All the laws of physics and everything else exist because of God's creation. I don't think we should be terrified of it. I think we should look into it. I think we should learn about it so that we can correctly talk about these things. A big one that came up, I'm going to stay away from this one, I'm just going to mention it, is young Christians' church experiences related to sexuality are often simplistic and judgmental. I'll just mention, look, we wait until mid-20s, 30s to get married. It's hard, right? You turn 15 and you're, or younger at these days, and your hormones are going crazy. Sexuality is a thing that people will struggle with. It's not something that we should be afraid of talking to people about in the church. It is a natural thing. It is a good thing, and we need to not just shun people that are struggling with that. I was actually surprised to see that one on the list, but it does make sense. Number 5, and this is where I start to. You have to have a line at some point. I put a line here where I'm not really willing to bend on this one. Reason number 5 that they mentioned was that these Christians that have fallen away wrestle with the exclusive nature of Christianity, because they have friends that aren't Christians, right? They have friends that might be, a Muslim or whatever it happens to be. And so they see the Church of Christ as this, not Church of Christ, well, it is the Church of Christ. They see the church as a, it's a small little insular group that doesn't believe anybody else is going to be saved. As a Christian, and it sounds terrible, but as a Christian, we have to stand by the truth. We have to preach the truth, and we can't waffle on that just because some people's feelings might be hurt. So those are some of the reasons and some of the things I think we can do to try to help it. And if y'all have any questions, let me know. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody's at different